Great Demon King, Chapter 43, Reborn. Han Shuo hurried back to the camp, moving with haste. The events of the night had left him shaken, but his body, though injured, still brimmed with a strange vitality. As he approached the campground, he noticed Jean sitting idly outside his tent, his face a mixture of boredom and mild concern. "Brian, where have you been?" Jean asked, standing as soon as Han Shuo came into view. "Have you seen Fanny or Lisa?" Han Shuo nodded faintly, his expression neutral. "Yes, Master Fanny and Lisa will be back soon." "Why are you still awake, Master Jean?" Jean let out a sigh and scratched the back of his head. "Clark left suddenly, said he had some urgent business. He asked me to pass along his apologies to Fanny. Honestly, I have no idea what that guy was thinking. Just up and left without an explanation. Bizarre, right?" Han Shuo's thoughts raced. Clark must have realized he couldn't explain his blunder at the pool. "Coward." Suppressing a smirk, he replied evenly. "I see. Well, Master Jean, I need to collect a few things nearby. If Master Fanny asks, tell her I'll be back by daybreak." Before Jean could respond, Han Shuo had already turned and disappeared into the forest, heading south. Despite his outward composure, Han Shuo's body was still recovering from the Deepwater Venom Python's attack. The lingering ache from the tail whip had slowed him down, and he knew that Fanny and Lisa, though grateful for his help, would likely scold him endlessly upon their return. He decided it would be best to avoid them for now, allowing himself some solitude to fully heal. Finding a tall tree with a thick branch about 10 meters above the ground, Han Shuo climbed up and settled into a meditative position. He began circulating the magical yuan, focusing on strengthening his body and accelerating his recovery. Time passed unnoticed as Han Shuo sank deeper into meditation. The aches and pains in his body gradually faded, replaced by a sense of growing power. His skin, muscles, and bones pulsed with energy as the magical yuan coursed through him, weaving strength into every fiber of his being. Suddenly, a sharp pain lanced through his mind, spreading rapidly throughout his body. Han Shuo cried out as the pain intensified, his voice echoing through the quiet forest. His muscles tensed involuntarily, and strange crackling sounds, like brittle branches snapping, emanated from within him. A faint, murky vapor began to seep from his pores, forming a swirling mist around him. As the mist dissipated, it carried away impurities from his body, leaving his skin clean, smooth, and glowing faintly under the moonlight. The transformation continued, his body rippling with subtle waves of energy, as if reshaping itself. When the pain abruptly ceased, Han Shuo felt a strange lightness and agility he had never experienced before. His senses were sharper, his body more responsive, and his strength had surged to a new peak. Han Shuo leapt down from the branch, landing with a soft thud on the forest floor. His movements felt effortless, and he marveled at the changes. He had successfully broken through the first demonic realm, the solid stage, marking a significant milestone in his cultivation. His body was no longer merely human. It was reborn, stronger, faster, and more resilient. So this is what it means to transcend. Han Shuo flexed his fingers and stretched, feeling the power coursing through him. He glanced at his reflection in a nearby pool of water, noting that his scars were gone, his skin unblemished and radiant. Even his posture seemed taller, more commanding. As he reveled in his newfound power, Han Shuo suddenly remembered the mysterious jade box he carried. Inside it lay the strange orb that had nearly drained his mental strength during his previous encounter. Now that his magical yuan could freely circulate throughout his body, including his mind, he felt confident enough to attempt to interact with the artifact again. Sitting down, he carefully opened the jade box. The orb inside, resembling a sinister eyeball, glowed faintly with a green hue. As before, when Han Shuo directed his mental strength toward it, the orb reacted immediately. A green aura flared around it, and the drop of blood suspended within the orb pulsed ominously. Han Shuo winced as his mental strength was drawn into the orb at an alarming rate, but this time, he was prepared. He directed the magical yuan upward, sending it surging into his mind. A deafening roar filled his consciousness as his mental strength rebounded, returning with explosive force. Collapsing onto the ground, Han Shuo gasped for air. His mind throbbed painfully, but the sensation quickly faded, replaced by a profound clarity. He could feel his mental strength had grown exponentially, sharper and more refined than before. As he stared at the orb, he noticed it was glowing more brightly. Strands of green light began to weave intricate patterns in the air, forming the image of a gray castle, shrouded in an eerie, otherworldly aura. The castle seemed to float between dimensions, half buried and half suspended in the air. Suddenly, the blood drop at the orb's center shifted, forming a red arrow that pointed south. Han Shuo frowned. What does this mean? The arrow pulsed insistently, as if urging him forward. His curiosity ignited. Han Shuo decided to follow its lead. The forest grew darker and eerier as he ventured south. The sounds of nocturnal creatures faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. The orb's arrow continued to guide him, shifting direction subtly as he adjusted his path. The deeper he went, the more the environment around him changed. The air grew thick with an oppressive, ancient energy, and the shadows seemed to writhe with unseen life. At last, the red arrow disappeared, and the orb emitted a brilliant green light that illuminated the area. Under its glow, the surrounding foliage and soil transformed. Weeds and shrubs vanished, replaced by cracked, barren earth. Towering trees dissolved into the skeletal remains of monstrous creatures, bone dragons, their massive frames twisted and jagged. Ahead, a massive gray castle emerged from the darkness. Half buried and surrounded by jagged spires, it exuded an aura of death and despair. Its walls were etched with intricate carvings of dark creatures, and its looming presence seemed to drain the very life from the air. Han Shuo stared, awestruck. The scene felt both alien and familiar, as if it resonated with something deep within him. "This," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, "is this the legendary cemetery of death?" "No."